there was a great division between the northern Octonauts and the southern Octonauts. They were called the Catfederacy. I see what you did there. You took Confederacy and made it Catfederacy. The Octonaut Civil War, it was a terrible struggle. Many casualties on both sides.
Pepper, my son! After the Octonaut Civil War, something was called Reconstruction.
After a long and drawn-out conflict, President Barnacles said, "We should be friends. If 10% of you will swear allegiance, you are welcome back in the Octonauts." Soon after the war, President Barnacles went to the theater, the Octonaut Ford Theater, to witness a play. But on that day, John Wilkes Booth Turnup came in and assassinated him. Pew, pew. The Confederacy had lost a friend that day in the assassination of President Barnacles.
And Captain Barnacles broke his leg.
Oh yeah?
And his arm.
Aww. After this horrendous event, President Barnacles was no longer part of the team. The other Octonauts said, "We need all of you, at least 50%, to swear allegiance." The division would grow. There was a debate. Are they our Octonaut brothers? Should we let them back in the Octonauts? I don't think so. We should take whatever they have left. They broke away from us. That's it. I'm taking back that guppy. All right, welcome back. Real quick, please don't put that President Barnacles was assassinated by Turnup in your essay. That was just a reenactment of Lincoln being assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Okay, we're finishing up Reconstruction. What is being reconstructed? The United States, okay? The North and the South, they fought a war. Now you got to put Humpty Dumpty back together. What is the critical lens? Right. Is the South our brother, or is the South our vanquished opponent who we should take advantage of? Okay, so that is the lens that we are looking at. Okay, voting restrictions. They're going to set up laws. People in the South aren't like, oh, Civil War's over. Everybody's back on the same team. No, you have these freedmen, and they're going to now be able to vote. And the South is going to want to repress the vote, okay? So they're going to come up with voting restrictions. In a little bit of a broader sense than just voting restrictions, you have Jim Crow laws. Write it down, take a picture. You need to know what Jim Crow laws mean. You will hear that in a modern context. I'll show you a video of it later. But they're laws that enforce segregation. We'll talk about sharecropping. Is it the new slavery? I'll leave that up to you. And then we'll talk about industrial movement in the South, and we'll get going. Here we go. Oh, wait, before we get going, real quick, what are the 3 Reconstruction amendments you need to know? Okay, excellent.
Excellent.
You need to know 13, 14, and 15. What is 13? The amendment that banned slavery. What is 14? Civil Rights Amendment. And what is 15? Guarantees suffrage to African Americans. Remember, males at this time, we haven't, there's no voting for women until the 19th Amendment. Okay. Here's our timeline. Oh, wait, nope, hold on. Okay, what marks the end of Reconstruction? The election of 1876. We'll talk about it. What case upheld the segregation laws? Plessy versus Ferguson. Remember, the 2 worst Supreme Court decisions are either Plessy versus Ferguson or Dred Scott, your choice. What are Jim Crow laws that enforce segregation? Again, That's more important than selecting A, B, C, D on the test. You need to understand that. You need to know what Jim Crow laws mean. Here's your timeline. Lincoln has his 10% plan. What was the other plan? Wade Davis bill. Excellent. You have the 15th Amendment ratified. Here we go. Okay, the election of 1876. Let's just skip to the chase here. It's between Hayes and Tilden. Look at this. Who gets the popular vote? Tilden. But who has more electoral votes? Hayes. Spoiler alert, this is going to happen in American history over and over again. So when I was young, it was Bush versus Al Gore. And in the last election, it was Clinton versus Trump. And one side gets more electoral votes and one side has the popular vote. And after every election, people say, we're going to fix the system, or the system is broken, or whatever. And I'm not here to get into that debate of whether the system is right or wrong. I'm here to tell you that historically speaking, you're not fixing anything. What does the Americans do after there's a popular vote and an electoral vote and they're different? What does America do? We do nothing. Okay, that's historically what we do. And so when everybody comes out, oh, and we're going to change the system, I'll believe it when I see it, because it's happened before and we don't change anything. Sorry, that's just the history of America, okay? So let's take a look at this. And so basically what happens is Hayes makes a deal. Look, give me these electoral votes. I'll be the president. I'll end Reconstruction. We can go back to being one country, and that's what's going to end Reconstruction, okay? If you're in the South, you're still not comfortable with African Americans being able to vote. Brainstorm. What are some ways you could keep people from voting? Think about it real quick. All right, here's what they're going to do in the South. One is a poll tax. You have to pay money to vote. Did you think of that one? That's not a hard one to think of. Oh yeah, you can vote. That'll be $100. Right away, you're keeping a certain demographic from being able to vote, okay? Literacy test. You have to be able to read and write. Remember the black codes? Remember the slave codes? Learning to read and write was against the rules for slaves. So if you have a literacy test right away, again, you're going to cut out a certain demographic in the population. And then lastly, grandfather clause. You don't need the literacy test if your grandfather was eligible to vote on January 1st of 1867. Guess how many slaves their grandfathers are allowed to vote in 1867? Obviously 0, since they were slaves. So go ahead, you can pause the video if you want to. I'm going to keep going, but make sure you understand that these are different ways. If I ask you 1 or 2 or 3 different ways that you keep people from voting, these are the ways that they would keep people from voting. All right, Jim Crow laws. These are laws requiring segregation, enforcing segregation. Later on, we're talking about separate hospitals, separate schools. And so our primary source is Plessy versus Ferguson. And what they're going to say is separate but equal is constitutional. Now, look at it in practice. What's equal about these drinking fountains? What's going to be equal about the schools or the books? Who gets the new books? Who gets the old books? Who gets the new infrastructure, the new building? Who gets the old building? Does that make sense? They're separate, but they're hardly equal. These are called Jim Crow laws. I want you to watch this video real quick.
The reason that we are the only country among advanced democracies that makes it harder to vote is it traces directly back to Jim Crow and the legacy of slavery. And it became sort of acceptable to restrict the franchise. And that's not who we are. That shouldn't be who we are. That's not when America works best. So I hope that people pay a lot of attention to making sure that everybody has a chance to vote. Make it easier, not harder. And so the idea that we put in place a whole bunch of barriers to people voting. Doesn't make sense. And then as I've said before, political gerrymandering that makes your vote matter less because politicians have decided you live in a district where everybody votes the same way you do, so that these aren't competitive races, and we get 90% Democratic districts, 90% Republican districts. That's bad for our democracy too. I worry about that.
Okay, we just watched former President Barack Obama, and he was talking about voting and fairness and equality. He said the word Jim Crow. You should know what that means now. He also said the word gerrymandering. What does gerrymandering mean? Did you get that right? That's a tough one. Gerrymandering, remember when I showed you the little districts in each state, and they draw them in such a way to make sure they maximize their own political power. Do you guys remember that? Especially, I think it was Texas District 35 or 37. It encompasses a really strange part of Texas because they're trying to put a certain voter in there. Do you remember that? Okay, gerrymandering, drawing the lines kind of funny so that you get as many votes as possible. All right. Your primary source is Plessy versus Ferguson. Go read that. It's real short because it's just the case brief. It's not the full case. Make sure you read that, okay? And from Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, okay? Plessy versus Ferguson establishes the principle of separate but equal, okay? I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's one of the worst Supreme Court decisions, but that's what it does. Okay, sharecropper. The worker gets a share of the crop/profit, and the landlord supplies the tools, the land, the seed, okay? So this sounds like a fair deal until we start doing the math. Let's just pretend that it's $10 for rent, a couple bucks for seeds, some tools. You grow your cotton, you make a little bit of money. But what happens if okay, but look, now let's take a look at this slide. What happens if maybe the crop doesn't come in the same way that you thought? There was a drought, or there's a bug, or there's some way that the crop doesn't come in and you end up only making $10, but you owe $17. Well, guess what? The landlord gets a larger share next year. So here's a slide showing the cycle of poverty for the sharecropper. And you're going to end up owing more than you have. And you're going to end up in debt to the landlord. And what does this start to resemble? Slavery. Okay? They're trying to repackage slavery in a different way. And so sharecropping, is it better than slavery? Yes, in some ways, because there are some times that the sharecropper can get enough money that he can get out of this cycle. But for most of them, they're caught in this cycle for life. Okay? Last thing we're going to talk about, industrial growth in the South. And I'll read you the quote from the book. They buried him in the heart of a pine forest, and yet the pine coffin was imported from Cincinnati. They buried him within touch of an iron mine, and yet the nails in his coffin and the iron in the shovel that dug his grave were imported from Pittsburgh. So what that quote is saying is, look, we're in the South. We have the trees, we have the iron, we have the cotton, we have all the raw materials, but we don't have the manufacturing base to turn those raw materials into finished products. We need to get some factories and industrialize down here in the South. So as we come to a close, the South has learned their lesson from the Civil War. They need to diversify their portfolio. It can't just be about cotton, and they need to work on value added. They need to create finished products and not just be a raw material base for the North. Okay? That brings to close this unit. Go ahead and study for the test. It'll be later in the week. I hope you have a good day. Take care.